Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Big Variable series right here with Cryo. We are excited to host our second speaker for the day. His name is Uvaraj Gunasekaran. So, Uvaraj, welcome to Cryo. It's exciting to have you here, and it's your second time here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's really,
Yeah.
good to be here. And thanks everyone for joining in. And
Yeah, so folks, Yuvraj has a lot of experience, technical experience, right? He is currently a senior engineering manager at eBay. We've had Yuvraj on Cryo previously to talk about REST API design, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. So you can go ahead and watch his very insightful presentation on good quality REST API designs as well. Right. Uh, Now, the topic for today and what we're going to talk about is, career and tech insights from somebody who's been in the tech industry for decades. Like, you've heard a very good perspective from Abhik on making those career transitions and actually getting the opportunities to work in different kinds of companies. And hopefully we can learn from Yuvraj about, shaping your careers and understanding more about how to plan your tech career and tech journey. Right. Yuvraj, do you want to go ahead and quickly introduce yourself, your background, and your journey so far?
yeah, sure. Hi guys. I joined as a junior engineer back in 2005 in Computer Associates. Sorry.
Sorry, I think I'll go ahead and mute them. I think so folks, please go ahead and mute yourself uh, so that you can hear Yuvraj loud and clear.
Yeah, thanks. I joined, as I said, I joined as a junior engineer in Computer Associate back in 2005. And I worked on small internal tools that help Computer Associate team where they can sell their product online, right? So basically, we are building a sales tools very beginning, and then I'm supporting some customer care issues, while using some of these tools and building in enhancements. Those tools, especially helping the sales organization. And then back in 2007, I moved to eBay. I joined eBay India and worked in Chennai for four years, and then moved to US in 2011. And since then, I've been here in San Jose for almost 10 years. So in eBay, I've been part of risk organization most of the time. Essentially, I joined as again, a software engineer, and then I moved up in the ladder in the last 10 years, and now I'm being a senior engineering manager, managing fraud team within eBay. And essentially, we manage risk for whole eBay. Risk has 6 different verticals within eBay. One is onboarding, buyer risk, seller risk, compliance, fraud, and foundation. I am primarily managing fraud team, and we have a corresponding team in Shanghai as well. So we have about close to 18 Scrum teams under risk, and I'm managing a couple of Scrum teams in San Jose. So we essentially, when the user goes through different flows in eBay, like buying, selling, signing, registration, member-to-member communication, post-transaction, they will call our risk APIs to determine the risk level of different entities, like user, IP, machine ID, transaction, and things like that. And essentially, we'll determine the risk level of the different entities, and based on the risk level, user will have a different experience. Like if it's a high risk user, user will be challenged and blocked. And if the
Right.
user is medium risk user, we'll refer to CS or we'll throw some verification. If it is a low risk user, we'll let the user go through. And we operate at a scale close to a billion events per day. And the systems that we build, typically it's a highly scalable systems. And yeah, that's pretty much at
Yeah,
a very high level
yeah,
what
it's a
we do.
pretty interesting field actually. So for those of you who are not familiar with some of the things that you've just talked about, right? Um, Identifying risk like fraudulent transactions, and there are different areas of risk that Yuvraj also outlined. So basically, automated algorithms using machine learning is probably the only way you can actually catch a majority of these risks. You can't have real human beings go ahead and evaluate, right? Whether a potential transaction is safe or unsafe, is it legitimate or illegitimate, things like that. So pretty exciting team and area to space to work in, right? And you get a sense of the scale as well, right? Billion requests per day. Did you say, Yuvraj?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a billion requests per day. How's that for scale? And how's that for interesting engineering challenges? For starters, even the ability to process a billion requests, leave alone identifying whether they're legitimate or not. So I think it's very exciting and great engineering and technical challenges to solve in this area as well. Yuvraj, some of the things that let's start from the beginning.
Mhm.
You've had a very rich technical career so far.
Mhm.
If you have to reflect on the beginnings and how it all started, right? Uh,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that you wish you had known when you started your journey in tech? What are some of the things that you wish you had known that you know today?
So actually, there are a few aspects that I want to cover in that area. Right, earlier, in early part of the career, it's very difficult for especially when you join big companies. You know, managers or colleagues will not tell you what are the things that you need to do in the beginning part of the career until it is too late, right? So there are certain key aspects that you need to primarily focusing on in early part of the career, right? The very first thing that I can think of is setting a long term career path for yourself. What you really wanted to do, you need to know that at beginning of your career. If you know about that, it is very easy to build the skill sets around it, and we can march towards that, right? That is one of, for most of us and including myself, it takes long time to figure out what you really want to do, right? There
Right.
are different roles in the software industry, right? It is not about just coding anymore, right? In the recent in the in the latest technologies that we have in place, there are a lot of emerging roles coming in, right? Like software engineering, architect, quality engineering, UX designer, product owner, and specialize in database administration, data
Right.
analytics, data scientist, machine learning expert, and computer vision and AI, and go on.
Yeah.
So you need to figure out initially. I mean, it takes some time to understand a lot of different roles and what exactly each role means. Whether you are passionate about particular role or not, that is fine. You don't have to know on day one, but at least in the early part of the career, if you can you know find out what you are really interested in. You are thinking about a career of 20-year 30-year career in software industry, right? If you really had to be staying that long, you need to understand, you need to know what you really wanted to do, what you're passionate about. And then once you identify that, you don't have to, that is very key, because
Yeah.
once you identify that, it will be easy for you to build the skill set that is required for that particular role. Say
So
if it is a
Yuvraj,
soft. Yeah.
just a quick question there, right?
Mhm.
many young people here in the crowd today,
Mm-hmm.
many in college, and there are working professionals with 1 to 3 years of attending today.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them find it difficult to sort of figure out what is that long-term plan. It's very difficult to plan, uh, you know, even 3 years, leave alone, 10, 20 years, right? So how do you figure out what you want to do? Any tips or suggestions you have to, and you hinted that you also had some of this difficulty earlier on, and you went through, not difficulty, but you went through a phase when you're just discovering your
Yeah.
interest and passion. So how do you know what you want, and how do you go about
So,
figuring it?
that is the advantage at the earlier career, right? You have a lot of time to explore different areas, right?
Right.
Try to do something, what you really want to know. It is like, it is like sports, right? What you really like, it's something that you need to try it on, and what's your strength or what you're passionate about. Try with your intuition first, right? The one thing that I liked in early part of my career is you know writing code, right? It's as simple as that, right? So I initially, when I had the my when I started my career, initially they wanted me to try quality engineering role, right? But some of my friends are passionate about quality engineering, and they choose the quality engineering role. But when it comes to me, I said that no, it's not something that I'm interested in, right? Something it's based on my intuition, right? This
Right.
is what I really wanted to do, right? It's fine. And initially, that's what I said, you take your time. It's not necessarily you'll have to do it, you'll have to know on day one, but within first few years, you'll be able to identify what is your interest, right?
Right.
Try out, try to learn about what is software engineering, try to solve some basic coding problems, and try to build an app, for example, and
Hmm.
see whether you are really interested about what is really makes you feel happy when you're trying to do it. Like,
Right.
sometimes you are thinking about designing systems which you might be interested in, or sometimes you might be interested in building UX designing, for example,
Right.
or architecture, for example, right?
Hmm.
So you try it out, and it's very hard, especially that's where you need to figure out which company you are going to work for, and whether there is an opportunity for you to try different roles. You are limited. Even then, you will have, I would say, outside of your work, you will have a lot of opportunities now to try
Right.
what each role means, and you can meet with people, you can understand what they're trying to do and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think in at least today, there's plenty of opportunities. A lot of these meetup groups are there where people actually discuss, and hacker
Correct.
groups, online communities where people get together and think about interesting projects to try. There's
Yeah.
also, a lot of online training programs where you can actually take one of these programs. It provides you a structure, and you can actually go ahead and build
Correct.
something in some line of interest. It could be UX design, it could be building a small Android app. But
Yeah.
then that's what gets you interested. You can also try writing, for
Yeah.
instance, or
Yeah.
basically figure out what your passions are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
But
that.
sometimes it's okay. You tried it and you don't like it. It's fine. Absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. The finding the right career path is very important, right? In the early part of the career. That's what it. Even if it takes time, it's absolutely fine. Sometimes for people to figure out, it takes like 5 years. It's absolutely fine, because you are thinking about long-term career path. It's not
Right.
like what you really want to do in next 2 years,
Mm.
right?
So I
That is
think,
one. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
that's
go ahead.
also the advantage of youth, right? Where if you've just graduated and you're still early in your career, uh,
Yeah,
less than 5 years of work experience, and when you look at a career trajectory which will span at least 30 years, it's okay to spend a few of those initial years
correct.
to go ahead and discover.
Yeah,
And Yuvraj, what you're essentially trying to say is, experiment
yeah,
and find out what clicks, and then
yeah,
dig deeper in areas that you find interesting and try to go deeper in those areas, right?
yeah, yeah. And there are few other points that I want to cover in this subject, right?
Yeah.
So one, in the beginning part of your career, do some groundwork about the task that you've been assigned to, and ask the right questions, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions. Hey, I'm a junior engineer. I don't know whether I'll have to question the senior engineers or the design or the any approach that they're taking about. Your inputs are always very important, and share your view in the large forum is very important, right? But at the same time, the reason that I'm asking you to do the groundwork is that you need to understand first how the system works before asking the right questions. You should not be in the large forum. You should not go and ask them, hey, can you tell me how it works? But rather, you understand how it works, and you can ask them what is the limitation of the system, for example, right? So that is one of the key aspect that um, junior engineers lack nowadays, right?
Mhm.
But now that is something that we need to cultivate that skill
Right.
set in the beginning of the career, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what also happens in taking the status quo for granted, right? You
Yeah,
think, okay, this is how it's always been done, but then as a fresher, and this is why many companies, startups, big companies alike, and certainly in my experience, what I've also seen is the freshers who come in have so many ideas and so many different perspectives, and
right.
it's important to keep that. It's very valuable. You have to question the things, and why is it being done this way? Can it be improved? And many times people who have seen this like 4 or 5 years, they don't think about it. It's a blind spot. You
Yeah,
assume that this is the way it's always done,
yeah,
and then this fresh energy comes in from colleges and they start questioning the status quo. uh,
yeah,
but you touched upon something useful there, which is, you have to go deep and really understand the work that's been given to you, and ask the right questions.
yeah,
Yeah, as a fresher, how do you go about some of those things are also things that we can actually talk about. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Cool. And a couple of few more things
Sure.
I want to cover here. One,
Yeah.
I'll take a minute. One, it is okay to fail. It's okay. Your beginning of the career. It's okay to fail, and you can experiment and try out different things. But make sure that there is no customer impact. That is absolute mandatory, right? So it's okay if you cannot release something to production and making an impact, but it's okay to try it out and see whether your approach works or not, right? And similarly, build a learning muscle, right? When I say learning muscle, it is not in the beginning part of the career. You need to learn n number of aspects of it, right? Not just writing a code, what you know in the in college and the beginning part of the career. You are primarily focusing on writing a particular piece of code and trying to understand, build an API, for example, build an implement certain operations or functions in a method, right? So things like that is not going to help you in the long run, but just to understand how the whole API is going to interact with other APIs, how the database is being designed, why we are choosing one versus the other, what are the limitation of the systems. You need to understand all these things, learn as much as possible in the beginning part of your career, from learning from either it can be a technology or it can be a customer issues or the limitation of the systems, and understand how the whole end-to-end flow uh, looks like, right? So this is very important. The reason that you need to build the learning skill, learning muscle, when I say learning muscle, not necessarily you need to learn just once. You need to continuously learn. You need to prepare that mindset that you need to learn on a continuous basis, consistent basis over the period of time, right?
Right.
The, the reason is that over the period of time, you are not going to stick to one problem statement or one domain or one company or one technology.
Right.
Continuously, as long as you build the skill set, learn this muscle, then it's easier for you to learn anything new,
Hmm.
whether if you go to new company or if you need to adapt to a new technology, or if you have to redesign the existing infrastructure. So you'll have a path you already went through. If you are in beginning of your career, you build the skill set, it's
Right.
going to help you in the long run, for many years to come, right?
Yuvraj,
These
what
are
are
different aspects.
some ways and tricks or techniques you have to build this learning muscle, especially earlier on? And languages change. You go from a company to another company. It could be a Java thing
Yeah.
somewhere. It could be ASP.NET somewhere else. It could be like C sharp, or it could be different languages. It could be different frameworks, right? Um, but if you have to distill this idea into some examples around learning muscle, right, building this learning muscle, how does one go about building this learning muscle?
So let's start with what you are currently working on, right? That's where we need to start, right? You say, let's assume that typically you will be asked to build an API or build a system that is suitable for a given customer problem, right? So start with that. What is that? In big companies have a different set of challenges versus the startups. In startups, you can explore different technologies, whichever you're comfortable with, you can start with that, right? So we can whichever you're comfortable, like whether it's a Java or a Python or Node.js, it really depends on your comfort level, and you can try it out and make sure that that technology is being supported by the ecosystem of the company, right? You cannot do something completely outside of the company where, say, for example, for large companies, you may not, let's say, you cannot try Python where Java is predominantly used in the large companies, right? So we need to go with uh, uh, the ecosystem that is built and maintained by the company itself, right? So in certain companies, you are limited uh, by that constraint, but that's where you need to start focusing on, okay, this is something, if I join this company, I have to learn this one, right? Let's start learning the Java, for example. If the company
Right.
supports Java or Python, you need to start learning Python. Don't just learn about how to write a particular function or a particular API, but think about understanding the concepts of different aspect, why we are doing it in this way,
Hmm.
right? That is
Right.
very essential.
Hmm.
Uh, don't worry about the current task at hand, especially at the beginning of your career, but your objective is to learn the concept. How do you apply that concept to your current problem,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Say, to give a simple example, let's assume that you are trying to build a database for your one of your APIs, right? You have an option to choose Oracle or NoSQL databases. Before going there, you know that your company is predominantly using Oracle, you can go and start using it. But before choosing that, have you explored other technologies? What are the limitation of it? What is cap theorem, for example? What
Right.
happens in what is a DB locking condition, right? What is different database limitation of one database versus the other?
Right.
Understanding that,
Hmm.
and then choosing the right technology, even though you know that you're going to choose Oracle because that is what your company is using it. But understanding that concept, uh, choosing the right database, and then you can choose the database whatever you want to do. But it is the problem is, I mean, the advantages of the learning these basic concepts is, it is going to help you in the long run,
Right.
where when you are designing a much bigger system, You
Right.
know that how these things works. You know that you need to apply these principles to see whether which database is a right one to choose when you have flexibility to choose different databases, for example,
Got it. I
right?
think if you have to sort of summarize, uh, basically, be curious about the application that you're working on, and try
Yeah,
to evaluate it from all points and go as deep as you can.
correct.
Right. Of course, you have to balance it with your work deliverables as well. But basically getting curious and poking holes everywhere and going as deep as you can, understanding all the basics, will give you a much more well-rounded understanding, and
Yeah,
also helps build that learning muscle that you were
yeah,
talking about, and
correct,
that becomes a habit in
correct.
every kind of skill that you take.
Yeah.
So did you say you have one more thing that you wanted to touch upon?
I think, yeah, I think I covered everything.
Okay.
And one basic thing, is we don't have to discuss too much about it. And
Yeah.
junior, at least when I was junior engineer, typically I attach myself to my code or solution. Basically,
Right.
I'm emotional about the solution or the code that I
This
write,
is
right?
my baby.
Exactly, but
Right.
don't worry about it. In my mind, right now, when if I think back, that was one of the it is not right. Actually, you need to attach yourself to a customer problem. How
Right.
best I can serve the customers, right?
Right.
So don't even your solution is not the chosen one, which is fine. Don't worry about it. Get a perspective from different
Got it.
people and try to choose the right solution for your problem rather
Right.
than attaching yourself. Hey, don't get emotional about your solution or the code,
Yeah.
right? It helps you. It will help you to reduce a lot of stress in the long run.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think sort of getting too attached. I think one of the things that happens is if people give you code review comments, or they
yeah,
tell you probably the approach that you took could have been better. This is not optimal, or maybe it's great and it's over engineered, and so it's going to
yeah.
take twice the amount of time to implement the same thing when a simpler solution could have worked.
Right.
And you could have iterated along the way. I think if you get too attached to one way of doing things, which is your way, and then it becomes difficult to collaborate or make those trade-off decisions as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
right. Yeah, I think those are great. So, Yuvraj, opportunities for building this learning muscle, and getting into and setting yourself up for a good, productive technical career. You think how would you contrast the opportunities that startups offer versus larger companies?
yeah. So yeah, these two are two different aspects that you need to consider, especially in the early part of your career.
Yeah.
I think the startup will give you more opportunity to experiment, but they have a less tolerance for failure. So that's the biggest challenge, I would say, right? And it depends on what's your appetite for a risk, right? So how well you perform under pressure, for example, right? So because the startup culture, typically you need to build solutions in days, right?
Right.
If not hours, actually. So you have to work under tremendous pressure, but at the same time you'll have a lot of opportunities to experiment, because they don't care which technology you use. They care about only the solving the problem at a very short period of time, right?
Right.
They don't care about how it's going to scale in 2 year down the line, right? They want to solve the problem now, right?
Right.
That is the biggest I would say both advantage and disadvantage. It's up to the individual whether they have the appetite for taking the risk, and you know uh, uh, they will be able to work under pressure as well, right?
Mhm.
And one of the other aspect of startups is that you will be able to give an ability to work on different variety of things, not just in large companies your role is defined as a software engineer,
Right.
as an QE engineer, as an architect, as a DevOps, as a a product owner, and things like that.
Right.
But in startup, you have ability to work on wide variety of things, right, and take more responsibility. You can be a product owner, you can be a developer, you can be a tester, you can be a DevOps, you can do end to end, right?
Right.
That opportunity, that's what I said in the beginning of the career. If you have an opportunity to work on startup, that will be great, because you have an opportunity to work on wide variety of things and play wide different roles to figure out which one you really like the most.
Right.
And then you'll be able to figure out, okay, this is something that I'm really interested in. Then we can focus on the building the muscle for specific skill set that you really care about, right?
Got it.
That is the biggest advantage of working in the startup, right, in my
Right.
mind.
Right.
But coming back to the large companies, where you will be uh, the biggest advantage in the large company is that you have a whole ecosystem or support system built for you to help to succeed in a particular project. In the sense, you will have a project manager, you will have a product owner who will define the product, you will have a project manager who will manage the roadmap, you will have a DevOps who will take care of the deployment and building the systems and things like that. But your only opportunity is to learn as deep as possible, solve the problem the best way possible is the role that you need to play. But
Right.
in contracts, in startup, you don't have to worry about going deep. Actually, you'll go wide range of you'll go widely as possible, learn the breadth of the system. You'll
Right.
not be able to know the depth of the system, actually, right?
Right.
That is the difference between startups and the large companies.
Yeah, one of the other things that come up, questions that some of the users have had, uh, is around mentoring. Startups are going so quick, so fast,
Correct.
and getting access to some good quality mentoring, and people who can actually sit down with your code, do a proper detailed review, and then tell you, okay, here are the trade-offs that you're actually making.
Correct.
Opportunities for that tend to be sort of lesser in a startup environment versus in a large company, where the success of the company and the uptime, and of course not introducing those customer bugs that you
Problem.
mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
So in the interest of those things, at least, there tends to be a much more rigorous sort of review process.
Yeah.
And in a large company, the product has evolved, it's already being serviced by millions of users, and so you get access to a great reference code which has gone through the taken the beating, has been fixed, and is now in a mature state, which can serve as a good model for how to build good products from scratch. And if you can
Yeah.
get some of these skills, uh, then maybe you can add much more value in a startup later on. Like
Yeah.
two approaches: startup and
Correct.
then go to a big company, versus go to a big company, get that experience, and
Yeah.
then come to a startup where you can execute very, very quickly. You want to
Yeah.
share your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So you are right. Actually, the large companies, you have a lot of resources lot of resources available, from budget, for example, to the tolerance for failure, for example, and
Right.
mentoring, and making sure that the product works whole end to end, not just uh, you know uh, uh, not just for your particular component that we are thinking about, how it will fit into the large vision of the organization or the company itself, right? So you have a lot of resources available for large companies. I happen to work on wide variety of opportunities within the large companies, where you will be able to you don't have to worry about budget, for example,
Mhm.
and you don't have to worry about, if I say that this is the right way to do it and I want to extend the timeline, I am able to influence people to do that. But
Right.
that won't be the case in startup, for example, right?
Right.
Because the business needs are different, in the startup world, the the needs are changing every day on the
Right.
startup environment, right? You
Mhm.
don't have a flexibility to take that such tolerance in the startup world. That's why
Right.
it's getting really challenging, right? But
Right.
one of the things that I want to cover is that find the right mentor is also very important,
Right.
especially in the large companies where
Mhm.
you don't have an opportunity in the startup. Find the right mentor because everybody is busy. They don't have time
Yeah.
for you to mentor in a large company, in
Yeah.
startups actually.
Right.
So large companies, if you choose to work on the large companies, I would say there are two aspects. You need to build relationship, right? One,
Mhm.
find the right mentor. Once you identify that this is the long term career path that I want to take, find a role model, right? And try to have an try to talk to them. Typically people will have a time to coach and they will be very willing to work on it. It's really depends on the personality, but majority of the companies, majority of the people will try to help you out. So finding the right mentor and getting their inputs and coaching you side by side, it will be enormous help to for you to grow faster and learn much faster because they have a lot of experience and they want to share it with you.
All right.
And the other aspect of building the relationship, find a coworker which has similar thoughts and similar mindset where you can collaborate and learn, right? That is one of the things that I think I did right in the beginning of my career,
Right.
where we, at least there are few engineers within my arc where we think alike,
Mhm.
where we try to experiment and we discuss a lot about technical challenges, right?
Right.
And everybody will come out with a different solution. Not necessarily you'll have to agree to the solution, but having this uh, like-minded people,
Mhm.
you'll be able to talk and discuss about different problems and learn from one another and then grow together, right?
Sure.
That is very key essential, building that such a relationship. Not necessarily they doesn't have to be in the same org. For example, some of my friends are not in the same org, they're in completely different org,
Right.
and we'll get an opportunity to work together. We never get an opportunity to work together actually.
Okay.
But whenever I need to know something about let's say selling domain, I can reach out to that person and say,
Got
hey,
it.
what is happening, can you give me
Yeah.
ideas about how to solve these problems, right?
All right.
So that is another key aspect. So those things you'll be able to do it in large companies.
Yeah.
And for startups it will be really challenging. The
Yeah.
reason is that everybody is so busy on their deliverables.
Yeah, I think there are two key takeaways there. One is finding the right mentors, and it's not one mentor. You can have a network of
Multi-
mentors that you
yes.
always consult with, and
Yeah.
also a peer group that is sort of pushing you and sort of you can fall back on if you have any difficulty, or even a sense of motivation. There are a lot of people running the same race with you,
Yeah.
and it's nice to have that camaraderie, and you build it over many years, and this becomes your trusted
That's
sources
it.
of people who will give you some
Yeah.
valuable feedback on any. It could be technical, it could be non-technical aspects of the job as well. It's great to actually work towards these things, and this all of these things take time. It's not
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm going to start a peer network tomorrow and then bang, you have 10 people. It doesn't work like that. These are
Yeah.
relationships that you cultivate for a long
Correct.
period of time. So,
That's
Yuvraj, I
true.
want to go now to a discussion on tech stacks.
Hmm.
Okay, I think through your journey, I think you've been exposed to different tech stacks, uh, and our audience here, students, early career professionals, right? Uh, there tends to be a lot of fad around a few frameworks, or people think, okay, this is going to be the future, and everything else is a thing of the past, and it doesn't have any relevance anymore. So, you want to touch a little bit about the kind of frameworks that you have seen before, or the frameworks that are there today, and the ones that are emerging, and sort of address things around which one to choose, why, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's my personal opinion in general. That's why I call it out in the first thing. Don't attach yourself to certain technologies, right?
Right.
So the reason is that it is going to. I've seen lot of such technology frameworks that I loved is out of the market, and it is not. Nobody is using it anymore,
Right.
right? The reason is the industry is evolving much faster pace right now, especially if you go back 10 years 20 years back. The technology is doesn't change. It takes years to change, decades to change. For example,
Right.
like C++ and Java was there forever, and it takes a lot of time to emerge a new technology. But in the modern era, it's like every few years you'll get a new technology,
Right.
and it has its own advantage and disadvantages and limitations, right?
Mhm.
So in my mind, especially for the coming generations, I would say that don't attach yourself to a particular technology or a concept. For example, the reason is, it nothing is going to last for your whole career.
Right.
When you're talking about 10 years 20 years, I'm pretty sure you will end up completely new technologies that we never encountered in the past, and in the or in the present, right?
Right. Right.
So but say, and the other aspect is, don't go after what is really hot in the industry right now, right? We have seen it in the past that data analytic role was very crucial. Big data is a very big industry that we evolved in the last let's say last 10 years. For example, 10 years
Mhm.
before, it was the hottest industry. Everybody wants to get into that
Yeah.
and build products around it. And it industry is evolved a lot from these incoming talent, right?
Uh-huh.
But my personal opinion, again, you, you should be asking yourself the question, what you are really passionate about, right? Don't go after, again, what is really hot in the industry, but what you really passionate about. And
Right.
sometimes it sometimes it's matches, because most of the engineers are industry is moving towards that. Say for example, currently industry is moving towards machine learning and AI, right?
Right.
It's absolutely important for you to learn some of these things, how machine learning model works. That's why you need to build this learning muscle,
Right.
right? So once you have that, it doesn't matter which technology. It takes few months, and if you build this muscle, you should be able to learn as quickly as possible. So the basic concept is, that's why I it's my personal opinion. Some people are very, I have some friends very attached to particular technology, and they really wants to you know uh, argue about it. Hey, which one is
Right.
better than the other, right? It is fine. And say for example, juice versus spring and things like that, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's going to be very challenging if you're attached to a particular technology, because industry is going to move towards a new technology which is much more scalable and the
Yeah.
thing, right? Say similarly for Oracle, it's impossible to think 10 years back that somebody else is going to replace Oracle, right? But now there are a lot of databases like MongoDB, Couchbase, Cassandra. It's all emerging, and
Mhm.
people are moving towards that. So in my mind, I mean, we can talk about it. What are the predominantly used technologies, so that you can get into an industry? That is one strategy you can always use.
Right.
I'm not saying that you should you know you should not you should not learn about those technologies, and you want to wait for a very long time until a particular technology emerges,
All
right?
right.
So
Yeah.
that is absolutely fine. But I would say that keep open minded, and build the learning muscle, so that you can learn any new technologies in much faster way, so you don't have to worry about adopting
Right.
a new technology, right? That's one of the early part of the lessons that I learned. You don't have to attach to a technology or a code, anything that
Got it. I think, Yuvraj, if we think about them not essentially as technologies, but actually building blocks,
yeah.
like say you want to think about the kind of skills you want to pick up, right? So
Hmm.
you want to learn how to use some kind of a database and
Hmm.
administer, manage, design, schema,
Correct.
optimizations within a database. That's one area. Then maybe some things around web servers and how they work or something like that. And then, like if you have to look at building blocks like this, can you identify, maybe some three, four, maybe five building blocks that are good areas to pick up some good solid strength in, so that it sort of adds to that learning muscle that you're talking about, and will come in useful. It'll come in
Yeah.
handy,
Correct.
regardless of how the technology is changing or the companies that you will go to, things like that. Yeah, can you
Yeah.
touch upon those building blocks?
Yeah, sure. So the fundamental building blocks for a good engineer is building the problem solving skills, right? So not just learn about it and apply that on a daily basis, right? When I talk about applying it, let's say that, okay, you know how binary search works, you know how sorting works, but how do you apply that concept on a daily basis, right? So how say red block tree works, if you don't apply those concepts, just learning about it is not going to work. You need to build that muscle. How do you apply some of these basic concept problem solving skills and algorithmic skills to um, apply it on a daily basis? That is the very first fundamental building blocks that you need to build in the early part of your career. And the other aspects are like do an experiments, like build an app, build an Android app, build an iOS app, try to understand how the whole thing works from end to end perspective. How do you build an API for building a small application? Like it could be as simple as just task manager. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. Just going through the journey of building an app, understand what are the different things that you need to take care when you're building an app and things like that. So do experiments, not just building an app. Think about how do you build an API which is going to scalable for millions of users. Build let's say a tiny URL website, for example, right? So those things are very experimental ideas that you need to try. And uh, and the third aspect is you talked about building an API and how do you design a database and things like that. In my mind, it takes a lot of time. So I would say that learn the concept, basic concept, like I said, cap theorem. What is cap theorem? What is consistency? What is availability? What is partitioning? And when you're talking about databases, right? And then what is role or contention problem? What is eventual consistency means, and things like that. And similarly, when you're building an API, you need to think about uh, what is REST API, what is SOA API, what are the advantages, limitations of these technologies. Understand the basic concept of how the protocol works and things like that, right? Those are all building blocks that you need to develop that learning skill,
Right.
which will help you to become a better engineer in the long run, right?
Right.
And the other aspect, very important aspect, is to um, when it comes to design, learn about different design patterns, right? What is
Right.
singleton? What is factory method? What is builder a design pattern? What is adapted design pattern? And what is state machines and observer design pattern and things like that. And similarly, you have a lot of software design principles, right? One of the very basic thing that a lot of junior engineers don't understand is that what is single responsible principle means, right?
Right. Yeah.
People generally, when you're developing in the very beginning, you will build everything in a one particular class,
Right.
right? You'll have one class and you'll have multiple methods, you'll be writing hundreds lines within a method, and which is very difficult to understand you know in the software design perspective, right? So you need to understand basic design principles, like what is single responsibility principle means, right? Every class should have a single responsibility, right? It should be an object. You should operate on that particular object, for example. And what is open close principle, for example, and what is interface segregation principles and design inversion principles. You need to understand these concepts. These things will help you to become a better engineer. When you're talking about designing a system, large scale systems like APIs, or a large building an database design for a big use cases, then it will come in handy. You will not go do some basic mistakes when you're talking about a wide audience, right?
Right.
So, and these are the very basic building blocks that I can think of. There are a
Right.
few more. I just,
Sure. Yeah, I think
we
that's
can cover
that's
it later.
quite useful.
Yeah,
Just one more question from me, Yuvraj, before we go into questions, audience
yeah,
questions, right?
yeah.
You manage a global team. You have talent from across the world, different
Mhm.
countries, right? How do engineers sort of prepare to be part of global organizations and sort of look at career opportunities not only within in the context of our current audience, not only within India, but also picking up skills that are relevant for some of the top companies of the world. Yeah, how
Yeah.
do they set
So
themselves up? Yes.
I think you need to be keep an eye on in the industry, right? What in India, there are a lot of startups are emerging. The uh, the um, the scale that we operate is completely different from, let's say, from Europe companies startups, or US startups. US startups, we have a lot of advantage in terms of, let's say, they have a lot of resources. They don't have problem with the funding, for example, right?
Right.
They can hire an really top talented engineers to do the work. So you need to follow the industry where you are primarily want to focus. Say if you want to focus on US market, or Europe or China, everything has a different skill set that you need to build, different muscle that you need to build in each of these industries, right?
Right.
So in India, it will be completely different than what you need to do in US, for example.
Right.
So most of these concepts that we talked about is going to be applicable for every market, but you need to look into different perspective when it comes to industry, or when it comes to different countries or geography, right?
Right.
So when we see, to give a simple example, when you an interview in a startup in Bay Area, for example, their expectation is to for an early engineer, even for a college grad or a junior engineer, the expectation is to build really highly scalable system on day one, right? They will give you a problem statement, and you should be able to take care of it from concept to completion, right?
Right.
That is a simply the expectation. Even the interview will be very, they will be asking very loaded question, which is very ambiguous, and you should be able to ask the right question to clarify everything and able to build a system within 45 minutes to 1 hour, right?
Right.
So that is way different level. If you look at, let's say, you know uh, different startups in Europe or Australia and things like that, right? But because the market that they're focusing on when we are building it, the companies, like very beginning of the early stage of the startups, they expect a lot from an engineer. It
Right.
doesn't matter whether it's your junior or a senior or a leader, right? The expectation is way different in every industry, right? So you need to apply again these principles what we talked about: building the muscle, learning about different technologies, learning about basic building blocks. Everything is needed for all the markets, but you need to just look at what they primarily look at in every market may be different,
Right.
and every role will be different in each of these countries. So you need to apply that. You need to look into different perspective and apply towards that actually.
Right. So Yuvraj, I think got some very good ideas. So I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. So folks, if you have any questions, please ask them now. So what I'll do is we have a Slido link, and I'll go over the questions here, right? So the first question is, how can I build up my courage, and what path do I choose as a fresher to start contributing in open source, or when I see big projects on GitHub, it gives me a heart attack. Yeah, I mean,
So
basically getting adjusted to large code bases and starting to make contributions. And I think this is also relevant if you go to a largish company where they have established code bases, right?
correct.
So you want to share your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So first thing is, don't be afraid. It's okay. Don't be afraid. You need to think about, when we contributing a big open source project, you need to think about all the different aspect of it. Basically, think about all the use cases. Write a better JUnit, for example. You'll get a better confidence. When it goes to regression, you'll get a better confidence before productionalizing it, right? So that's why when we are talking about building, contributing to open source project, you need to have a very good, design principles. You need to apply very good design principles and get an input from different people, and making sure that you are getting different aspect of it and building it, and just make sure that you understand the use cases and you go through all the test cases and everything is looking good. You'll get a better confidence, right? So if
Right.
you apply this, first time it will be very scary. I see. I get that. But once you do few iterations, you'll get more confidence. Sometimes it's okay. You can make mistakes. It's absolutely fine. Don't be afraid. You can try and learn actually. If if you fail and if you don't learn, that's where your biggest mistake, right? And if you back off, then you will fail. I mean, you will not be able to have a courage to try it again, right?
Right.
It's okay. Be open minded, get your hands dirty, and then try it out. And you'll have a, in open source project, you'll have a beta versions and things like that. You can try it out, get feedback from early customers feedbacks, and then incorporate that, and then get confidence over time, right? Don't be afraid is what I would say.
Sure. We'll go on to the next question, where somebody is too distracted. They find that they want to do too many things which are diverging, and they feel confused about not being able to decide what to pursue at first. How to make this decision? Any tips?
So I would say go by your intuition, right? Start with what you know and go by your intuition, and uh, don't try too many things at the same time, right? Because you cannot learn anything. Pick one and go by your intuition. Pick one and try it out and see, learn and do, and then let it take time. It's okay. Don't try to learn everything in a very short period of time. It's about the journey. It's not about whether you how fast you reach it or not, right? Because you're thinking about long term career, right? Don't worry about trying too many things, and don't get distracted. Focus one at a time is what I would say.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good advice. And the next one touches upon technologies. So,
Okay.
I've been working as a Python backend developer for 2 years. Would you recommend that I learn Java for backend and C++ to get into a product-based company?
Not really, because most of the companies, they don't care about what language that you write code, and as long as you understand basic concept and you have a problem solving skill in a particular language, they don't care about whether you code it in Java or a C++. As long as you know able to solve a particular problem, they
Mhm.
yes, you have a learning curve once you go into the company, but I would say that stick to what you know, and learn as much as possible within Python. And once you get into the industry, then if the company demands for Java, you can learn it, right? It's not I don't think it's a big deal to learn
Yeah,
from Python to Java or C++, but stick to what you know, and learn more about it, and
right.
don't worry about Java or C++.
I think one
But
of the
in the,
distinctions that come up there also, Yuvraj, is knowing a strong typed language versus something like Python, and having expertise in at least one strong typed language like Java or C++. Any thoughts on that?
so I think that's what I'm saying, right? Industry is moving towards they don't care about which programming language you know, right? So I think in India it is still predominantly they're focusing on probably Java and C++.
Right,
But that is something. In that case, we need to figure out which language you want to try it first. But I would say that you don't have to try too many things. You learn as deep as possible. If you are expert in one, that is
right,
good enough in my mind. But if there is a demand that most companies, let's say your resume is not even selected for many of these companies
right,
because of programming language, then you can try to experiment with one language which you think it is
right.
suitable for you, right? Either it can be Java or it's C++, it doesn't matter. But then you can learn about it, and then you can experiment with few projects and apply that as an experience, and then try to see. But
Right. I
in
think
my
you
mind,
have to.
at least I'll never, in my resume screening process, I'll never use programming language as a constraint uh, for any junior engineers or senior engineers, actually.
I think the key takeaway there is focus on depth, and the more
Yeah,
deeply you know what you know,
yeah,
that is the differentiator, and not necessarily the
yeah,
choice of language,
yeah.
right?
I- yeah,
So,
and more than that, specific to this question, industry is moving towards Python. A lot of companies, large companies, and startups have started using Python. So I think it's a in my mind, you are one step ahead of the industry. So it's okay, you know.
right,
So
Yuvraj, we're almost running out of time. We'll take one final question before
sure.
we sign off.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's a question on motivation. How do you keep yourself focused and not get distracted while learning? And how do you keep that motivation going so that eventually you achieve that ideal learning muscle, which makes you very, very, agile to take on projects of different kinds?
So yes, it is very important to motivate yourself. But that's why we need to. I covered couple of um, things that you need to take care, which will cover. I mean, I missed the motivation part, but essentially building relationship. When I talk about it, when you're talking to mentors, when you're having a group with a like-minded people, then you will motivate yourself actually, because people will be talking about problem set. Hey, I tried something, I built an app in iOS, I ran into these challenges. Did you guys face any of these issues? These things will motivate yourself. You will become a okay, let me try to build an app, for example, right? And similarly, the building the learning muscle beginning of the career is very important. The reason is, once you start building the learn a particular concept, you will feel motivated, you will feel confident to try something new. to try some. The more you try, the better you will get it, right? But sometimes it is very, I mean, I understand in early part of the career, especially if you're working in big companies, you don't get an opportunity to work on too many things that you want to try it out or what you're passionate about. You will be forced to work on the technologies, or you'll be forced to work on certain aspect of the project that they really care about, right? So in that case, I would recommend you to start exploring outside of the work. Start building, start building an app or an API, and try to use cloud-based, technologies. Try to see something that you can, whatever you makes you interested. Start doing that. Start something small. Don't try to set a high goal in the beginning. So small things will help you to motivate yourself, and if you do it consistently, you will get constantly get the motivation actually. But if you set your goal really high, in the sense, hey, I want to build an API like WhatsApp, right?
Mhm.
You don't have to go to that level, because it's going to take enormous amount of time. you will
Right.
you will need a motivation, consistent motivation, say for a 3 months or 6 months to do something good, meaningful, right? So I would say start something small, so that you can extend it and make it better and better, so that your motivation will keep on increasing.
That's great advice, and I think that's a really good way to sort of conclude our conversation as well. Some very good tips, Yuvraj. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on some of these things that typically engineers who are starting out, or students who are sort of trying to learn more about the industry, they don't get this kind of insight. And you having the decades of experience, if you will, right? I think have shared some very valuable suggestions uh, with all our listeners and audience today. Thank you very much for those insights. Any parting message that you want to share?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks everyone for listening. And I would say stay hungry, stay foolish, learn as much as possible. That
Yeah,
would
that's
be,
great. Yeah, thank you very much. And that's what we try to motivate our users at Crio as well. So if you haven't checked out our website, please go ahead. It's Crio.Do. Thank you very much for joining us here in this edition of Big Variable Series, where we get some of the top industry experts come and share their knowledge. I hope you had a good time today. And yeah, until next month for our next series, thank you very much, and hope to see you all again very soon. Good evening, and thanks everybody.